just went underground behind closed doors. I know some of my relatives who owned taverns before Prohibition turned them into hardware stores with speakeasies in the backyard at that time. What did we learn from this? Marijuana has been treated as alcohol in the 1920s and 30s. The goal in 2015 is to promote a better understanding of marijuana, its benefits and risks. Education needs to replace a lack of understanding and lessen our fears. There is no doubt that there are risks, and situations like pregnancy where it should not be recommended, but it's used widely as an anti-emetic for morning sickness. We know that has influence on neurologic development, primarily in children up to the ages of the mid-20s. We also know that alcohol in pregnancy has detrimental effects, yet it remains illegal. I recommend that we move forward toward legislation to remain mindful to support dispensaries and caregivers in the process. We have nothing to gain from large corporations who will promote GMO versions of marijuana and try to capture a large portion of the market. I'm in support of both of these legislations, and I'm glad to take any questions at this time.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Number 4 is Becky.
Good afternoon, Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle, and esteemed members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. I'm out of my element here. My name is Becky DeCloister. I am founder and currently the Director of Community and Education for the Wellness Connection of Maine. We operate 4 of Maine's 8 licensed, inspected, regulated dispensaries. And I am here today to present testimony on behalf of our CEO, who cannot join us because she is at a conference about which the subject is cannabis business. So this is testimony in support of both LD 1401 and 1380. My name is Patricia Rosie, and you have to hear this in a French accent. She has a lovely French accent, which I can't do. And I serve as the CEO of the Wellness Connection of Maine. I testify today to urge you to support LD 1401 and 1380, which will allow Maine to regulate responsible adult use of cannabis. Semantics matter. It is important that this is a bill about responsible adult use, not recreational, not medical use. We view cannabis as a beneficial plant and believe that its cultivation, dispensation, and use are rights that come with equal responsibilities for its producers, distributors, and consumers. Merriam-Webster's definition of a caregiver is, quote, a person who provides direct care as to children, elderly people, or the chronically ill, end quote. We are all caregivers in the medical marijuana industry. As such, we believe in offering a diversity of retail channels that consumers can choose from based on their personal set of values or financial means. We support consistent regulation of all producers, small and large, to ensure safety and best quality for the benefits of the end users. I'm going to skip a little bit of history here, where we talk about the history and work that the Wellness Connection of Maine does. We do operate 4 dispensaries around the state. We have recently opened licensed and inspected commercial kitchen in Gardner, where we're producing medicated edibles. And in 2015, we do plan an expansion of our production site to meet increased demand for high-end therapeutic cannabis. This will create at least 15, possibly 25 additional jobs and provide economic stimulus to the region. And this sheds light on the positive economic impact that allowing for and regulating the adult use of cannabis could have on Maine's economy at large. The regulation of Maine's existing dispensary program for medical marijuana helped our state achieve a top ranking among medical marijuana states in an overview published by Americans for Safe Access in 2013. Both of these bills take this current regulatory framework as a baseline to build upon. Maine should build from what we know works and be wise yet flexible, learning from other states who have implemented legalization. We've heard some very good lessons already from other speakers. I do want to direct your attention to the final paragraph. I see that my time is up, but Patricia is also a mother of 2 adolescent daughters, and that puts her in a very unique position in terms of the work that she does and her role as a mother. And I would encourage you to read her testimony, and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, next is number 5, Chris.
Good afternoon, Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle, and the distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. My name is Christopher Tolford. I am a resident of Cumberland, Maine, and I am currently employed as a controller at the Wellness Connection of Maine, the state's largest medical marijuana dispensary operations. I manage the day-to-day financial operations of our 4 dispensaries. So if you have specific questions about the business side of the world, I would be happy to answer those questions following my testimony. First, I would like to shed some light on the services that our facilities provide for more than 8,000 patients statewide. So let me start by setting the scene for you. Take our Portland location. You pull into the parking lot in the Arts District and approach a door monitored by video surveillance, where a receptionist behind double-pane glass will buzz you in. From there, you are required to show identification and documentation that you indicating that you have the necessary privileges to enter our dispensary. Once inside, you take a number and relax in a waiting room to speak with a patient liaison, not unlike going to a pharmacy or waiting for an appointment at the doctor's office. Once your number is called, the patient liaison will check to see if you are eligible for a disbursement of product based on your recent visits. Our liaisons also help patients determine what variety will best serve their needs and will help them identify the appropriate delivery method. Compare this setting, even more secure than pharmacy, with the way that thousands of Mainers are obtaining marijuana on the black market, interacting with individuals who likely have other harmful drugs for sale and purchasing unknown products grown in uncontrolled and possibly contaminated environments. The difference is clear. If you take one thing away from my testimony, please understand that the dispensary model is not about getting patients high. It's about helping people get through the day without pain or mental anguish. Perhaps it would be helpful for context if I explain some other jobs at Wellness Connection of Maine. For instance, I am a CPA. I work closely with the HR manager, who interacts regularly with the marketing and communications manager. We also have a director of education and outreach and a director of security. By passing this bill, you can shift jobs away from unregulated, untaxed, and underground economy into attractive, highly skilled, upper middle income opportunities for college graduates. I'm not an overly political person, but I seem to recall a common theme in campaign materials I received last fall, regardless of party affiliation. Most candidates seem to focus on the need to keep young people in Maine creating good jobs. I've been watching the news and I haven't heard of any proposals that will create hundreds of jobs, of new highly skilled jobs, while simultaneously generating new tax revenue in the millions and systematically eliminating a decades-old black market. Thanks for taking a moment to hear my testimony. I'll do my best to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Chris? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next up is number 6, which is Scott Durst. Not here.
Somebody must have signed his name.
Well, that's fine. Number 8 is Pat Kimball. Welcome.
Thank you. Long wait. Long day. Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. My name is Pat Kimball, and I'm the Executive Director to Wellspring, which is a substance use treatment program located in Bangor, Maine, and I'm the President of the Maine Association of Substance Abuse Programs. I'm here today representing MESAP to oppose LD 1380, an act to legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana, and LD 1401, an act to allow to regulate adult use of cannabis. The cost of substance abuse in Maine, according to the 2013 annual report of the Office of Substance Abuse and Mental Health, was $1.18 billion. The $1 billion price tag touches every part of society. in Maine, including all aspects of our lives. It is a burden on our social services, our municipalities, our public health, our criminal justice system, our public safety, increasing crime, employability, and the Department of Child and Family Services. I'm not going to read the whole testimony today, but I am going to tell you that as MASAP members that we believe that marijuana is addictive and it is an issue that we need to address in the state of Maine. That it is, in some terms, what people would call the gateway drug. It is a drug that people use and use regularly. We have many concerns about the high rate of use if we legalize it, and referring to earlier the sheriff talking about Colorado and what they're seeing with their youth. We also have a significant problem in wondering what that will do to our families and our rich history and the legality of it. And also we know that we have the same concerns about public safety that sheriff's departments do. But please read that. But most important, I'm going to read to you, I brought my cell phone. As I was sitting here, I'm going to read you my text. It's a personal thing from my daughter. Mom, I just wanted you to hear this before you got home and saw it on the news. My grandson, he's 11, is in middle school. 2 of his friends just got picked up in the bathroom for a drug deal, and there was a gun involved. It was marijuana. This is the reason that we oppose it. And we believe that we already have a drug addiction problem in the state of Maine that we can't get our hands around. And we're trying very desperately to put money into treatment, to find ways to keep people out of jail and into treatment. For the increase in allowing marijuana and the availability of it, I get it, they can already get it. But that just means that access to it is all the more. When I read that, my heart sunk. These are 2 kids on his Little League team that I know and he knows. This is the reason that we have to seriously look. I get there's some sort of urgency. I think it is in the best interest of this state if we simply wait to see what happens federally, what happens, and trust that we take our time. Don't be pushed by other people. We're Mainers. We make the right decision. We don't let anybody push us. We look at things logically and do what's best for our community. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. If you have lots of questions about addictions and treatment, I'd be happy to answer those for you. But thank you very much and read the testimony.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kimball. Oh, I don't think you mentioned the name of the school. But
I didn't,
Good.
but it's in Maine.
I do have a question for you, and this comes in nature as follows. Reading your testimony, make reference to regular use of marijuana doubles the risk of being diagnosed with schizophrenia or reporting psychotic episodes in adults. But could you give me the sources for that information? I'll be fooling around out there somewhere.
I would be glad to get you.
You just sent it to me.
Did you get it? Again, I apologize.
This-
It was
this
written
was-
by Mesa, so
this-
I will get you the
No, the
resources.
problem is we have a work session tomorrow, so.
Oh, well, I may be able to get it for you pretty fast. The use of the phone, I will text somebody and see if I can get you the exact site that came from.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next is Patty Hamilton.
Good afternoon, Senator Rosen, Representative Bell, and members of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee. My name is Patty Hamilton. I'm the Public Health Director for the City of Bangor, Maine. I'm here to speak today from the public health perspective to express my concerns about legalizing marijuana. Prior to officially taking this role for myself almost a year ago, I knew very little about marijuana. Like most of America, I thought of it as an innocent weed. However, after I watched the efforts to bring medical marijuana to our state, I recognize its potential value as a drug and as Maine's evolution to a safer, more regulated system that prevents fraudulent use of that drug. I applaud the caregivers using this medication according to the rules that promote safety. I was pleased to see that our state decriminalized marijuana, resulting in fines instead of jail time. I spoke with our sheriff, who verified that they indeed do not incarcerate low-level drug offenses. Over this past year, I've learned a lot about this drug. I have more to learn. I think we all have more to learn. However, knowing what I know today gives me great cause for concern, and I'd like to share those concerns, many of which have already been shared today. Colorado thankfully legalized marijuana in 2012, and I say thankfully because they've gone first, and we can learn a lot from them. Most of the research touted today has been done on the marijuana in the past. The marijuana with a 1 to 4% THC level. The THC level recently tested in recreational marijuana in Colorado was 20 to 30%. THC is what causes the high. What are the effects of the growing brain on a marijuana THC level of 20 to 30%? What are the long-term effects to adults, to regular users, to occasional users? What dose of medical marijuana works for what condition? How often? Those are concerns of mine. Incidents of unintentional poisoning of children are on the rise. According to ER doctors in Colorado, this is a new diagnosis for them. Prior to legalization, it was a rare event. Fatal car accidents, as you've heard, of those who tested positive to marijuana increased 100%. More teens are seeking treatment for addiction to marijuana. According to the HIDA report that the officer recommended, most get it from their parents. It's already here, as we've heard. Even more concerning is the tobacco companies are purchasing the domain names into marijuana. They're planning their next generation of users. E-cigarettes, the first generation, vaping is the second generation. These devices are marketed to youth, advertising sports paraphernalia, cool-looking devices with slick logos. We've been here before. This is the tobacco industry. It's not addictive. Don't worry, we can generate tax revenue. I've been here this year speaking about addiction, seeking needs for treatment, and now we're here paradoxically debating the merits of legalizing another drug. I have nothing to gain from the legalizing marijuana, except I suppose job security. Public health data takes a long time to accumulate. The industry, and believe me, it is an industry, wants us to rush into legalization. Profits are to be made. But there are concerns, and they're real, and we need to pay attention to them. It is my job to call attention to the public health crisis that is upon us. We need to consider where we'll be in 5 to 10 years from now. We'll be looking at teenagers seeking addiction treatment. What resources will we have for them? Will we be able to pay for them? We'll be looking for methadone, Suboxone treatment for our marijuana users. There will be. Happy to answer questions and to offer that support for my health department.
Well, seeing no questions, thank you very much. Okay, Nancy Gillespie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. My name is Nancy Gillespie, and I live in Falmouth, Maine. Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak in opposition to Bill LD 1380. On a Friday last October, one son overdosed on heroin and died. The next day, another son overdosed on heroin and almost died. A week later, in one 24-hour span, I participated in a funeral and an intervention because those were my sons. I'm a nurse, but I speak to you today as a mother who has watched drugs destroy the lives of 40% of her children. Between my partner and me, we have 5 sons. One of his is dead, and one of mine is lucky he isn't. 14 years ago, I never would have believed that this would be my reality. My children were raised in loving homes in an affluent suburb of Portland. You could give them what they needed, support and opportunity, yes, but supervision and discipline too. Then they started doing drugs. Because they were around and we cared and we paid attention, we knew they were using. But we figured it was a rite of passage, a phase, something they would grow out of. We allowed ourselves complacently because the drug they started with was marijuana. And we were right about the older boys. Their marijuana use remained social. They graduated from high school, went to college, and entered serious relationships and found jobs. We were very, very wrong about the youngest two. I know that marijuana encouraged these sons to look for a stronger high. I know that marijuana told these sons that they were clever enough to manage life as a drug addict. I know that marijuana taught these sons to use heroin. Tell me it's just hard. Tell me your son isn't my son, and I'll tell you this. The first line of our son's obituary acknowledged that he had died of an overdose of heroin. Since that day, less than a year ago, I have been approached by so many parents sharing their stories about how drugs have forever altered their children. All of them admit that when I am admitting to you today, we never thought our children would be They did, and it was too late. Also, there's no one starts with heroin. They start somewhere else. Often that somewhere else is marijuana. And if it's not your son, and it's not her son, and it's not their son, then whose sons are they? Because my sons aren't the only ones dying and almost dying. I was cavalier about the boys' marijuana use for the same reason you were being told to be cavalier about marijuana in our state. Look at where it got you. Is legalizing marijuana worth the risk that you could end up here, or worse, that your complacency could allow someone else to join me in this hell? My boys started with marijuana and it ended with heroin.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Representative Davitt?
Gillespie. Have those children who are good enough to thank you for this.
Thank you very much. Matthew Braun?
Dear Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle, and members of the committee, my name is Matthew Brown and I'm a resident of Portland. I'm also a person who wants firm recovery from an addiction. I'm here to testify in opposition of the bills to legalize recreational marijuana, LD 1380 and 1401. I strongly encourage you to oppose them too. While the story I'm about to share is personal, my account is consistent with what has been documented in the literature. I smoked marijuana for the first time when I was 16. At first, it wasn't a big deal. It made me euphoric. It helped me cope with my boredom and stress. But after 9 months of using it regularly, my life had already become a mess. I lost ambition for school, for sports, and for life. My thoughts raced. I was having panic attacks. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night for the past 3 months. I began to think I was going insane. I was paranoid that my classmates were out to ruin my life, and I believed that I was totally worthless. I was too miserable to live, but too afraid to kill myself. What was wrong? My parents took me to a psychiatrist who told me that I suffered from severe clinical depression, social phobia, and panic disorder. These conditions had not been there before I started smoking marijuana. If marijuana brought on these mental health conditions in me, I ask you, can it really be that safe? Marijuana had stopped being fun, so I started experimenting with other drugs. Towards the end, I was shooting heroin and breaking into houses to steal prescription pills. I had caused incredible harm to myself and to the surrounding society as a result of my drug use. At 19 years old, I went to rehab. For me, marijuana was a gateway drug. It set off a progressive addiction that was beyond my control. I've been successful in my recovery from drugs since 2009. However, my marijuana-induced social phobia persisted for years after I got sober. Sometimes it even flares up today. I was lucky that my brain mostly fully healed. I know many who have not been so lucky. I'm concerned with the negative effects of marijuana on brain development and mental health, especially in youth. I believe it is irresponsible to legalize recreational marijuana. Legalization, regardless of the conditions, will increase access to youth. Youth whose brains are still developing and who could suffer these same unfortunate consequences. I cannot in good conscience support jeopardizing the lives of youth who are meant to grow up and live healthy, productive lives. Can you? I strongly encourage you to oppose LDs 1380 and 1401. Thank you very much for your time and consideration in this matter, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Matthew. I'm glad you're doing very well today. Any questions for Matthew? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Roy McKinney.
Good afternoon, Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle. And members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety, my name is Roy McKinney, and as the Director of the Maine Drug Enforcement Agency, I'm here to testify on behalf of the Maine Department of Public Safety in opposition to LD 1380 and 1401. Drug abuse and our response to it is one of the most important and complex challenges facing Maine and our nation. There are real health, social, and economic consequences to the use of marijuana. The simple truth is that legalizing marijuana will not make life better for our citizens or ease the level of crime and violence in our communities. Under federal law, marijuana remains illegal, and the President has long stated his opposition to such legalization. Marijuana does pose a serious drug threat with great risk to the user and our society. Drug legalization's message that our jails are filled with those who have simply tried marijuana, the so-called drug war is a failure, and marijuana is safe, dominates the information that reaches the general public. Do the research and you will discover the real facts about marijuana, and the future does not look good for our youth and communities under a legalization model. Price, availability, perception of risk, and public attitude are the four major factors that have an impact on the rate of drug use in our state. This applies to marijuana as it does to any of the illicit or diverted drugs, tobacco, and alcohol. Legalization will lead to increased access to and use of marijuana by both adults and youth, with the perception that it is a low-risk drug. The average potency of today's marijuana is more than triple that just 25 years ago, when it was 33 to 4%. THC, the psychoactive chemical. Maine DEA sees Maine-grown marijuana with a potency level of 22%, as growers continually seek ever higher potency levels. 30% plus levels have been reported. Today, there are marijuana extraction processes that are all about getting the maximum THC, realizing between 60 and 90+% THC. Science tells us that high-potency marijuana contributes to addiction, learning dysfunction, direct IQ loss, car crashes, and mental illness. Science has demonstrated that marijuana is not the benign organic plant that the drug legalization agenda would have us believe. With legalization, there will be an increase in the consequences and costs related to marijuana use. Health, both physical and mental, substance abuse addiction and treatment, needs, safety concerns, and increase in crime. The revenue will not meet those costs. LD 1380 and 1401 offer that by legalizing, regulating, and taxing marijuana will in fact, among other things, eliminate the problem of youth obtaining the drug. Today, adults furnish and sell marijuana to youth. These same distributors will lower their profits and compete with government instead of each other in the distribution of marijuana. Colorado's experiment with commercialization of marijuana does not mandate a rush to consider legalization here in Maine. Colorado is facing unique public safety challenges with detection and successful prosecution of increasing number of drug-related driving under the influence cases and marijuana extraction lab explosions. Public policy must reinforce and support the understanding that there are consequences for drug use, and that makes the drug less accessible. In my testimony, you'll see information from the NIDA abuse director in regards to marijuana and what our efforts should be about, and simply legalizing a drug without regard to known consequences of such action, and foregoing the commitment to work to rid Maine of drugs. Sound drug policy must be rooted in evidence-based science, not driven by special interest groups who are looking to profit at the expense of our nation's public health and safety. On behalf of Maine DEA and the Department of Public Safety, I urge you to carefully consider the implications of these bills and encourage you to vote on them. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, and Representative Garish.
Thank you. Director, before you came in, I asked a question about the impact of this legislation, should it pass, on two things, the product liability, and I use the example of being down in Western New York County with, say, the Boeing engines at Pratt, or the aircraft, the shipyard, Carrie Portsmouth, and drug testing at these places. I know that they do drug testing, so we're hearing testimony that this stays in the system for 2 to 4 weeks. How is this going to impact the industry, and how are they going to deal with this when they drug test their employees?
That's an employer attorney question, if you will. I'm certainly not the subject matter on this expert, but that I know that is a concern of businesses in regards to drug testing, especially when it comes to productivity, safety in such many issues with manufacturing plants, much less whether it be bus drivers, policemen, and those in the public safety sector. And if I might add, I also heard a question, because I was listening in before I walked into work, in regards to the Rocky Mountain HIDA and what that is. The Rocky Mountain HIDA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. That is a program within the Office of National Drug Control Policy, within the Executive Office of the President of the United States. That also known, many often know the director as the drug czar, referred to as the drug czar. That office is charged with bringing to bear the resources of the federal government with regards to treatment, enforcement, and prevention, and providing funding for that. HIDA is the enforcement. Its effort is to facilitate cooperation between federal, state, county, and local law enforcement in the investigation of illegal drug trafficking. The Rocky Mountain HIDA encompasses 3 states: Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. Was created or established in 1996. The director out there, Tom Gorman, set out when Colorado passed their medicalization of marijuana and with the commercialization to start capturing data, because he thought it would be very important for other states as they deal with this very public policy issue. And it is their investigative support center which is charged with intelligence gathering and analysis of that information that produced that report that Lieutenant Scott produced here. And they've also will be releasing a 2015 study which brings in the data from what's taken place in 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Holly Lust. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Senator Rosen, Representative Fowle, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Criminal Justice and Public Safety. My name is Holly Lusk, and I serve as the Governor's Health Policy Advisor. I'm here today to speak in opposition to LD 1380 and LD 1401. In both of these bills, you are being asked to consider legalizing marijuana, not the low-potency marijuana of the 1970s and 80s, but a much stronger drug, one that gets stronger each year as new strains are developed. This significant public policy question touches on issues of public health, addiction, criminal justice, taxation, employment, and education. Obviously, as a committee, your expertise is within the realm of criminal justice and public safety. As a health policy advisor, it's my responsibility to implore you to consider not just the criminal justice aspect of this debate, but all of the inextricably linked aspects of a choice to legalize a drug. The sponsors would have you believe that legalization has no impact on the number of people who will use the drug. The people that will use it are already doing so, they say. Statistics have indicated otherwise. It seems the sponsors are saying that folks are already using marijuana and therefore we've already lost the battle against drug use, and so the only option is to legalize it and tax it. Legalizing a drug is condoning its use. These bills not only condone the use, they encourage it. The more people who use marijuana and the more they buy, the more tax revenue the state would make. Ironically, the state would spend money to police this program, and it also would spend a pretty penny, as we do now, to tell our young people not to use marijuana. The cycle of spending would continue. We would just have to spend the money on different aspects of marijuana enforcement, even if it was legal. The tax revenue in Colorado from legalization has been underwhelming. The estimate of new tax revenue from legalization was about $44 million in 2014. Maine has 1/4 the number of residents of Colorado. Assuming one can extrapolate from Colorado revenue down to Maine based on population, Colorado's taxation scheme is closer to Washington's, to that proposed by these bills. The math is unimpressive, especially when weighed against the necessary increased public health spend. The sponsors try to separate out marijuana from other illicit drugs. For people to argue that marijuana isn't the problem, but instead the real problem is opiates, is simply setting up an argument that will be repeated time and time again with various drugs, with methamphetamines, with synthetic marijuana, with bath salts. This is the slippery slope. The question for this drug, as with all drugs, is what is the benefit of legalizing it? This is a different policy question than how a society might ameliorate the negative consequences of the criminal justice system on marijuana users. We respectfully suggest that you ask yourselves, what is the benefit of encouraging recreational marijuana use? Just to finish up, since I know that you guys have a bunch of people coming and you only have one day until your work session, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I printed off this article from the New York Times that I found particularly salient. In all of the time that Steve Rowe, when he was the Attorney General, was working, he focused a lot on the marketing of drugs and